And this is Edleedskslnin style. Positive always chases negative. Anybody out there have suggestions what greatness that is? That means the air is positively charged. Or the air is neutrally charged, because oxygen and hydrogen have their different quirks about them. Their makeup, their individual atoms are charged a certain way. So it balances them out to be neutral. I don't know this, haven't researched it, but what I'm saying is the ground has two energies in it. It has the mass that has the quarks, which each individual atom has a certain attribute about it. So when it bonds to other atoms, it becomes a mass that has a certain charge about it. Now, if you think about, the sun puts out a positive energy. Anything that's mass will accumulate energy. So you have a energy about a mass that has different characteristics about itself, and then you have this pure light energy, which is absorbed by matter. So, back to Edleedskslnin. This is where he talks about sunlight, talks about his little ponds. He talks about how the sunlight and the process of it and water and the breakdown of the water per energy. And this here has sent me off into a direction to where if you in a metal want to share electrons in different atoms, many zillions of atoms, you bring metal in place, and your electrons will bounce out of its proton, out of its atom, and be shared by other electrons. But they always keep their same amount. So there's a built-in registry in that center nuclei that will only attract a certain amount of electrons. So those electrons will always be bound by the amount, but not bound by the individual electrons, because they will be shared. And this is where levitation comes in. Mr. Edleedskslnin, levitation. So if you think about the sun's putting out a positive charge coming out through the whole universe, right? You got to think about mass and its attributes about it is always going to be a negative and attract itself to the opposite charge of the sun. Okay? So now we get back down to, what if we want to share that energy? Yeah, we want to share it. So metal is the culprit. But it's not only metal. I showed a couple of experiments I've done in the past on the skin effect. We're actually using coral rock or wood, even wood. And you can see the electrons were so abundant in the wood that they were coming out and going to my finger. Well, they call that a skin effect, but you know what? There's deeper than just being skin effect. The fact that it does that in materials that are non-metal or non-metallic shows you there's a charge in there. That's where it comes down to. So it's makeup and its way it's designed. but it shared electrons through my finger. And that's how I look at it. Leave comments, guys. Love your comments. I know you guys are interested in this stuff because Ed has a lot of attention, man. Big attention. He's stronger now than he ever's been. And it's been people like you and people like me who stay interested and keep the legend alive. So we want to share electrons. And when you talk about sharing electrons, you're talking about levitation. Because naturally, if you think the ground was attracted to the sun, bam, up in the air, you would think that it's going together. So, you say to yourself, well, if that is in the environment, between the airspace, between ground and, say, the ionosphere, you have this pull. How come we're not being pulled up? And you would think about that. But you wouldn't be pulled up because when there's a yin, there's a yang. So that force that comes down gets balanced out through the whole planet between the gravity field, the magnetic field, I'll just say, forget about gravity, but the magnetic field, it creates this ether inside here that's more linear than horizontal. The linear is the attraction between the ground and the sun. So you get this energy and it charges up the whole planet and it keeps the planet charged, okay? So you think yourself, well, if I want to share electrons, how would I do this? So if I put a positive charge on something, will it levitate? Yeah. No. Why wouldn't it? Why would it? Because why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it levitate? If you put a negative, oh, that's the secret. If you put a positive, it won't, because it'll keep getting pushed down. If you put a negative, it'll reflect off the ground and go up. That's not levitation. That's changing the environment. And how come this thing don't just go up and take off? Why? Because there's pressures. There's vertical and lateral pressures. So here we go. We're back in Edleedskslnin live, fresh. That's where my mind is. You guys leave comments. This is where we're taking it, because we got all. If you look at this, dude, we got all this metal. We're going to move electrons. The electrons are in the magnets. We ain't even got to put power to it. You just got to get them in motion. You turn it, the electrons are going to move through the magnets itself and create a centrifugal force, because if you take a merry-go-round, all the energy has two things going on. One is an object would get thrown off, but the energy is pulled in. It has the opposite effect. You think about that. So all the energy is pulled to the center of the nuclei of this wheel. So what do we do with that energy? We're going to find out. And leave your comments. We're going to go ahead and start looking at this wheel with ground being power, amperage, and the magnetic flux that's going to be around the wheel when it's turning. Capacitors, PMH. I'm not going to use the PMH anymore as turning the wheel. I'm going to pull, well, actually I ain't going to pull this. I can leave it here, but we're going to use this as a control module to turn on and off the dual capacitors, because I have one ground rod to the ground and I have another, and they're going to have capacitors on top. So the capacitor, one capacitor will be flipping its pole and it'll be on this PMH, and then the other PMH will have another capacitor. So it'll be doing dual purpose. But when the capacitors flip their poles, that's where the whole thing gets tricky, because we have to create a spark gap, high voltage, and we're going to go ahead and start looking into the electrons, on sharing electrons. In the apparatus itself is going to be more of the signal generator, magnetic generator that is able to take wood, any matter, and be able to share the electrons in that apparatus, in that matter, in that material. That's kind of my goal right now. So, all right, guys, took up enough of your time. You guys, peace out, man. YouTube, rock on. Happy New Year, too.